G'day guys, Steve with Broken Sprocket, and in this video I will be replacing the gasket between my timing gear crankcase and the block, and also the main crankcase seal on the front of the engine. So let's get started. Okay, here between the timing case and the block, the gasket has broken and it's starting to leak oil. I think it's been leaking for quite some time, but it's really bad now, so I need to replace that. So to replace that, I'll have to remove the camshaft, which means all the tappets and that will have to come off so that I can slide the camshaft out. I may need to remove the diesel injector pump. I also have this main seal that runs on the front of the camshaft. It's also got a slow leak here, so I'll be replacing that seal as well, which will be not too hard a job now that I'm at this point. So as you can see, I've already pulled the front of the vehicle apart to get good access here, and now I just need to get into the more trickier stuff to remove the camshaft and this front timing case. Okay, I've just removed the sump. I didn't bother to record that because it's just not that interesting, but I do have to remove the sump because the sump comes around this timing case section, which is what I need to remove. And I also need to unbolt where the oil pump bolts onto these pipes, so they have to come off as well. But next thing now is to remove this timing cover, which is going to show all the other things that I need to remove on the car to get this timing case off. Now that all the bolts to the timing cover are loose, they're all different sizes. So I'm going to get this piece of cardboard and starting on the far right side of the vehicle, on the furthest bolt to the right side, I'm going to go clockwise and pull them all out individually and place them in that order on this piece of cardboard so that I know which one will go back in which spot, because all these bolts are different lengths. So all these bolts here for the timing cover, and this just makes it easier when I put it back together. I know which bolt went where, because as you can see, they're all different sizes. So now with all the bolts off, we'll try and take this cover off. Oh, boy, that took some getting off. Okay, now that I've got the timing cover off, I have to get these timing marks to line up. There's one there, there's one there, there's a number 3 here, and there'd be one on each one of these cogs. And what I have to do is get them to line up so that when I pull these cogs off, I know that they're all lined up, and I'll mark them with a bit of liquid paper or something as well, just to make sure that they're really easy to see. So I've got to crank this motor until I can get all of these marks lined up. Now to remove this pulley gear off of your crankshaft, you need to get a pulling machine like this one here. Unfortunately, my set didn't have the correct thread to go in there, so I just found some bolts and welded them to some longer bolts that did have the correct thread, and now I just need to pull it out, and hopefully those welds, even though they're quite thin now, I had to grind them down to get them through this, will hold. And if they do, that's fantastic. It doesn't look pretty, but it only has to work once. Ah, we're in the shit. It didn't work. It cracked the weld. Okay, I managed to get this little cog off. It's actually another day from yesterday, so what I had to do was I actually found these long bolts here that I use to split crankcases on motorcycles, and these ones fitted this cog, and using that with this here set up here, I managed to get them off, but they were way too long, so I had to use almost every bolt I owned to space it out so I could get to it, but either way I got that off. I also have the timing casing off now, and the two bolts that were holding it on here where it was actually leaking, they were actually quite loose, and I'm assuming that's why that gasket gave way. I had to take the camshaft out and all of that kind of thing, so now everything's off here and I'm ready to reassemble the timing case, so we can put all that back on now and get back to the assembly. Okay, I've got the timing case here on the bench. I ended up buying a full gasket kit as it ended up being cheaper than purchasing each gasket individually, so I will have a lot of spare gaskets when I'm finished. Also, the oil pickups had to come off so that I could take this casing off. They bolt on there, so quite a lot of stuff has to be pulled apart just to fix this one oil leak, which is a bit of a pain, but you get that on the big jobs. So time to reinstall this casing with new gaskets. To help with the sealing, I'll be using the JD World Ultimate Grey. It's a gasket maker. It's good for oil and where high pressure and stuff like that is required, so this is quite a good gasket maker, and it'll just help the imperfections in gaskets and stuff like that to just seal them and hopefully be less chance of leaking. Now to put this cover back on, we need to make sure that this little oil pump gear lines up with the crank shaft. There we go, that went in pretty good. Okay, now with that casing in place, I've got the bolts that will crank the casing down in, but I also put these longer bolts in that go through the cover because they also go through that same gasket. And I've just put them in so I know that the gasket is lined up for these holes, because if they were to move and I pinch these down, the hole might not line up, then I'll never get these bolts in and I'll have a problem with it. So just put these ones in there to hold the gasket in place as you tension these ones down, and then move on to your gears and the cover. Now with those torqued down, I'm just going to remove any of this excess sealer that's squirted out on the insides here, and just remove these bolts. Now I know that them holes are lined up. Now to put the camshaft back in place. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the camshaft as I install it. The camshaft looks to be in quite good condition, which I'm quite happy about, so that's a bonus. Lining up this last piece of camshaft, it's always the hardest because you've got to lift it up a bit right at the end, which has a lot of weight on it now, and I think I've got it. Yep, and in it goes. Probably should have put this crank shaft gear on first, because it will definitely be the biggest pain. I might just have to take that back out, that camshaft. I'll see how it goes. Okay, that little pulley seems to be going on. I'm just using the end of the hammer handle and tapping it piece by piece, going around very slowly, just taking it on piece by piece. It will take a little bit of time to get this on, but a little bit of patience is best off. and use something soft like a piece of wood or a piece of rubber up against that cog, because you don't want metal on that cog, because you don't want to damage it in any way. And just like that, with some patience, you will get this back in all the way up without damaging it. Now I need to adjust the timing, which means putting these cogs back in and getting the cam, the crank and the injector pump to line back up to these three little cogs here. So this is the hardest part. You'll notice I put a little bit of liquid paper on the cogs. That's because it just makes it easier to find where the number is. And I need to bring this crank over quite a long way, because that one, there's the 0 and there's the 0 there. I think these ones here may need to go one over each one as well. Okay, now I have these gears lined up, the 3 and the 3 together, 1 and 1, 0 and 0, and 2 and 2. So I know that the engine is now in time. It's all in time, so if it moves, now I just need to tighten all of these back up so that that's all set. Now that the timing gears are back into alignment, I'm going to put the top half of the engine back together, push rods back in, and get all that set so that I can manually turn the engine and make sure everything is not jamming up and there's no problems anywhere with it, to make sure that it all is in proper timing. All you do here is simply get your cam cup, put some oil on it, spread it around a bit. You sit that on top of your cam with this piece touching the cam. So that bit there with the hole goes up, slide it into the little slot there, get your push rod with the rounded piece, not that piece, this rounded piece goes in and goes into that cup, and you do that all the way along. Okay, now I'm satisfied that I've got all the timing in place and everything's good there. It's time to replace this main crank seal with a new one, because this was also leaking. Right, I'm just going to try and pry it out. You probably could take this off even with this connected, but I've got good access with that crank gone. Now give that a bit of a wipe inside here. Just going to add a little bit of lubricant, just a little bit, make it a little bit easier to go in. And then tap it in. I'll push it in. No, it will need a little bit of a tap. Okay, that is in. Just like before, I'm just going to add a little bit of this gasket sealer on here to make sure that gasket really seals up real good. And because I have all of my bolts in that piece of cardboard like when I started, I know exactly where each bolt goes as I'm going clockwise and finding each bolt's hole. Okay, now with the timing cover back on, I'm just going to put the rest of this engine back together. I've got the tabbet cover, the side covers, the oil pickups and the sump to go on. I'll put the radiator and stuff like that back in the vehicle and we'll get it running. And what we'll see once and for all if it runs, and also if I've fixed these oil leaks, which hopefully I have, because this is a pretty big job for a terrible oil leak. It's probably the worst gasket to have go on one of these engines, in the way that you've got to pull so much of the engine apart to fix that one oil leak. So I'll put it together and I'll see you in a couple of seconds with the engine running. Okay, what was a few seconds for you was a long time for me and a lot of work. But I finally got the little 2H going. I've taken it out, given it a good little degrease because she was pretty dirty in here. Also gave the workshop a bit of a tidy up because it was also a hell of a mess. But we'll start her up and we'll see how it goes. So she starts up well, it runs fine. Doesn't seem to be any oil leaks anywhere, so looks like I fixed the problem. I'll keep an eye on it over the next few days to check for more oil leaks. When I first started it up, I think by cranking the engine without it running, the cylinders may have filled up with diesel or something, because it blew a heap of smoke and there was smoke everywhere in here. And I thought maybe something was wrong, but it cleared up pretty quickly. So now this car just needs a blue slip, and hopefully that's all the problems I'll have, and we'll get it registered. So if you like this kind of thing, consider subscribing, give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.